ASMR videos. For today's video, I am under the weather. I am still sick, owing largely to the fact that I'm filming this video directly after the last one. So if I have convalesced, it's only by 20 or 30 minutes worth of convalescence. What a weird sentence. Whatever convalescence my body has accomplished, it's only had 20 or 30 minutes to do so. I'd say that's pretty negligible. So please excuse my sniffles as well as any level of congestion you can discern. Any changes in the timbre of my voice. I just moved the microphone a little bit. Can you hear the chain link fence? Someone just opened their chain link fence. So, for today's video, I thought it might be fun to do just a ramble, pure and simple. The subject of which is finances, namely my financial goals in the present, but I thought I could also talk to you a little bit about my childhood finances, not mine of course, but my family's finances during my childhood, just to give the conversation a little bit of context, and because a few of you have asked me to speak a little more about my childhood, so that fits the bill. Now I do want to, of course, name that discussing finances can, for a lot of people, bring up really painful, anxiety-inducing things. I've certainly at various points in my life, including in moments in the last year especially, not wanted to think about money at all. So if this is a feeling you're having currently, if the thought of money and any discussion of it is overwhelming to you, then I lovingly encourage you to skip this video, to sit this one out if it stands to be at all upsetting or anxiety inducing for you. Okay? Please always do what's best for you, what's kindest to yourself. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm a little loopy. This video is brought to you by Takewill. I know it's not supposed to make you loopy, but I just think the feeling of having your symptoms suppressed and having some sort of false boost of energy while you're in that kind of fog of being sick, it tends to make me loopy anyway. So if there's anything confusing in this video, then I would be happy to do a follow-up. I'm definitely going to do a follow-up. I mean, if it interests you, I want to do a video just talking about financial fantasies. Like, if money were house for 1 week every summer, which is really nice. So it may sound like I thought I was kind of on the cusp, but growing up that wasn't the case. I always knew I had privilege. I'd say because I went to public school until I was in 4th grade, and my peers, I was well liked. Like, I got along really well with my classmates. excessive money, excessive wealth. So I just never wanted to be like that. You know, I never wanted to be the person who would prioritize money over all else. Not saying any of them did that. I didn't. I was afraid of that. I did not want to live for money, for acquisition. So where does that leave me today? Well, obviously I continue to be very lucky, very, very lucky. I don't want to present with any false scarcity. I don't want to seem at all like I feel bad for myself financially, because I actually count myself very lucky. Yes, I live in a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment, and it's pretty old and a little rundown in places, but it's in Los Angeles. So that in and of itself is a lucky thing that I can live where I want to live, in a more expensive, like a way more expensive pocket of the United States. And I'm lucky because in all the years leading up to now, I've had more family support than the average person. I mean, I don't know, but I would assume maybe those statistics are different for Los Angeles. Maybe a lot of people live in Los Angeles on their parents' time, but I'm still pretty sure that I'm in the minority statistically. The vast majority of people don't have so much family support. But, as my family support has dwindled in recent years due to a number of factors, some family transitional, some family changes, there's a limit to what they can help me with at this point as they get older. So basically, I need to get real. I've said it before, but I know I need to become more financially minded. Stop avoiding the subject and start planning and really pushing for my goals. So what are my goals upward mobility, no ladder, other than I could year by year raise my fees for tutoring. But the past few years it hasn't just been tutoring. I've worked as like a nanny and a personal assistant and a personal shopper, and I've done work study, working the front desk in exchange for tuition for classes. Just like typical odds and ends. I've worked as a waitress, a cocktail server specifically. on the East Coast exists this storage unit where my family put all the contents. Well, as much as we could fit, we had to downsize a lot, but a lot of treasured items from my childhood home. When we lost the house and we downsized significantly, and a lot of the things we thought were worth keeping ended up in that storage unit. I'm the most sentimental among my family by far, so a lot of them have since, grieved what was lost in that transitional moment and moved on, and don't feel a need to keep that much from that unit. But for me, it's just such a treasure. Like, I would take the contents of that storage unit over its equivalent weight in diamonds or gold any day. It's just like old Christmas ornaments and a few pieces of furniture, lots of things from childhood bedrooms, keepsakes. But it's really, really, really important to me. So to be able to afford to transport those items across the country and then store them long term here in Los Angeles or nearby, I would research some places maybe that were less expensive and a bit of a drive. But that would mean the world and be a huge weight off my shoulders, because I would not be worrying every single day that my family's going to decide that we can't afford to keep that storage unit anymore and dissolve it. I don't know if you would say liquidate it, because it's not worth anything, but throw everything out. So yeah, those are my big, big, big financial goals. I know they seem a little silly, but they mean a lot to me. So I'm gonna make a follow-up video that's a little more fanciful, wishful, just sort of like if money were no object, what sort of things would I do on a regular basis? What would be at the top of my list in terms of, I don't know, acquisitions? It's just fantasy in general. I'm pretty in touch with the fact that things don't make us happy, but it's funny when people say, oh, money doesn't make you happy. It does to a certain extent, right? Like stability, security, and the freedom to, I don't know, do things that bring us joy. Those things correlate very directly to happiness. So that's just bullshit. But yeah, past a certain extent of financial well-being, financial stability, money does not make you happy. I definitely saw that in the environment in which I went to school those 9 years in that private school. So yeah, money does not make you happy. But still, it's fun to fantasize, so that'll be my next video on this subject. And I can't go this entire video without mentioning that I'm about to hit the $100 mark with my YouTube revenue. I'm still pinching myself. About a month ago, I started to actually make money off these videos. And in a day or so, I will hit the $100 mark, which is so surreal, because that means, I'm making money off something creative, which is what I wanted in the first place, So in that small way, I am realizing a dream of mine and moving closer to the financial reality to which I aspire. So thank you so much for the part you've played in helping me
Excuse me.